in the cloud. There we go. What was your graduate intern teaching certificate, Sebastian?
Well, in order to be a certified public school teacher, you have to have a prescribed curriculum. Every state's got rules about that. And in Pennsylvania, there was a series of classes I had to take. So it's just a general secondary education.
Okay, so it's like program. A teaching credential.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Public schools, right.
Okay, cool. Yeah, every state is different. That makes it so complicated.
Most states have reciprocity, though. If you get that certification in one state, walk with the paper to any other state, it works.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So usually we have like around 20 people or less. If we get up to 20, that's always like whoa. And I see some of the grad students on. Hi, grad students.
Hi, everybody.
We have most of them here. So we'll wait a few more minutes for.
Yeah, it's before time. A lot of people don't pop in until
I would, yeah, 5 minutes after.
Clock. There it goes. So you should get a few more. Hey, there's Gina. Hi, Gina. She may be in a.
I like her screen. She says, okay, so there's the chat too. I don't know if you can see the chat, Sebastian.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. You've done.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for questions there in the chat and try and answer people as I'm working through the talk.
Cool. Okay, so I'll start introducing you while we wait for people to find us. Okay, so welcome everyone to the SEAMS seminar series. I hope everybody had a good spring break and got to relax some after this crazy year we've had. So today's speaker is Sebastian Interlandi, who is a visiting professor, right? You're visiting associate professor of sustainable agriculture here in SEAMS. And he did his master's and PhD at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and along with a teaching credential there. And he's been working with communities and agriculture for many, many years, and is bringing that expertise here into the Valley. And I guess this is not a very long introduction. Sebastian, would you like to do anything more introducing of yourself?
No, I mean, that's great. I've been a school teacher and a farmer and a director at a not-for-profit organization that helps people figure out how to grow food in every which way possible. So that's basically what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. Cheryl, if there's nothing else, maybe I should just get started.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to share my screen here and open up the PowerPoint slideshow that I've got. Okay. So on my screen, I see all your faces over here. I'm going to try and minimize it to one. All right, that's for me. That's good. Okay, so here's the name of the talk. Access is everything. How community land trusts can help create an equitable and sustainable food system. I don't know how much you guys know about the way that food moves and is used through our society, but that's going to be a big thing that we talk about during the talk. So let me go ahead and get into the slides that describe the talk. So first of all, when we talk about access for anything that people want to acquire, there's nothing more frustrating than having a need that you need to fill and seeing the things that you need and not being able to reach them. So these images, the meme and the cartoon here are just meant to get you thinking about how people deal with issues in general when they have a need and they do not have access to the things that they need, right? It's frustrating. If you're a short person and you can't reach the top cabinets and you can't get the food there, or if you're a little kid and you're trying to struggle to get something off of a high shelf, imagine the feeling that you have there, because we're going to be talking about systems that are meant to help alleviate these issues and bring people closer to the things that they need and want. The specific system that I'm going to talk about the food system, and we're going to talk about helping people grow food. But as we talk about this, just remember that the concepts are applicable to any place where people need resources and they cannot get them readily. So the order of operations that this talk is going to follow looks like this. First, I'm going to describe what a land trust is. All right, I don't expect that everybody has read that paper that I sent out that talks about community land trusts. So I'll give you a brief explanation of what these organizations are. The second thing I'll do is give you kind of my primer on organizational structures, because the structure of this organization is important in understanding how it can be so powerful with so few dollars in the system. And we'll talk about what we mean by access as well. Third, we're going to talk about a few relevant facts and ideas concerning the food system. Following that, I'll get into the meat of the talk, which is the programs that are working at this place that I work called Southside Community Land Trust. Before I came to UTRGV, I was the director of farmland access and education at this institution that was developed to help people grow food. And lastly, we'll have a short discussion on where things go from here, not just for SCLT, which happens to be in the small state of Rhode Island, but also for community food systems in the Rio Grande Valley. Okay, so here is a description of the organizational models of land trusts. Many of you may be familiar with conservation land trusts, places like the Nature Conservancy. The idea of a land trust in general is just that it is a system whereby land is held, usually under an ownership title, for some larger communal purpose. And in the case of conservation land trusts, places like the Nature Conservancy and the Audubon Society will either buy land and prevent it from being developed, or they will purchase what's called a conservation easement on privately owned land. So for example, let's say that you own a big forest and a farm and you can't afford the taxes. The Nature Conservancy will raise money to purchase the development rights to that land, meaning that no longer will anybody be allowed to put buildings or other infrastructure on the property, but the property owner will still be able to maintain their title to the land and use it. So conservation land trusts essentially hold land in trust so that it can remain in ecological good health and for the perpetuity of the earth as the concept is. So conservation land trusts essentially lock land away, not to be used for any purpose other than just to maintain the health of the environment and the earth. Agricultural land trusts are somewhat different. An example is the American Farmland Trust. Agricultural land trusts oftentimes purchase conservation easements on large pieces of farmland, meaning that they buy the development rights to those pieces of farmland, and then they hand essentially they're buying the development rights from the people who own the farm. So let's say a farmer in Texas owns 5,000 acres, and every acre is worth $3,000. So you got $15 million worth of real estate there. The development rights to that land may be worth $12 million. So an agricultural land trust will come in, give a bunch of money, like $12 million to the landowner, but then the landowner can never do anything like sell it to a developer for housing. They can continue to own the land forever. Community land trusts are the realm in which I worked, and they're fundamentally different in that where conservation and agricultural land trusts essentially purchase development rights and make sure that nothing ever happens to the land, and they like to leave the land in the hands of the people who were stewarding the land and owning it before. Community land trusts essentially purchase or acquire with other means land that is designed to give access to that land for marginalized people for a purpose. That purpose can be the development of homesteads, the development of housing in urban areas, and it can be for the development of farms or for any other purpose for that matter too. Community land trusts have their history starting in 1969. In that year, an organization in South Georgia called New Communities acquired 5,700 acres of land, and they made it available by subdividing spaces, making those spaces of land available to African American farmers to build homesteads and to build farms. And that essentially, the people who were farmers on that land did not own the land individually. The land was held in trust for their use. They might have built buildings on the property and they'd own those buildings outright, but not the land underneath it. It's a model common to, let's say, trailer parks where winter Texans might come in a way. It's a development model where the land is held in trust for people to use for a purpose. New Communities ultimately lost their land in the 80s as a result of high taxes that the organization could not afford. Very typical story for farmers of color in the United States. Most community land trusts, as they're developed now, are based on providing access for urban affordable housing. So land trusts buy pieces of land in urban environments, they build or give that space to people to build their own homes. And then there's no way that, let's say, someone can take that home from a homeowner for not paying the taxes because the land trust is backing them and paying the taxes. If the land trust is a not-for-profit, they may actually have a tax reduction on the property, and it may make it easier for a group of people to live in a place where land might otherwise be expensive or unavailable to them. The place that I worked, called Southside Community Land Trust, is different from typical community land trusts today, which are focused on affordable housing, because it's an urban agricultural organization, and it's unique because of that. Its mission is to help people grow food sustainably. There's another organization in the little state of Rhode Island where I worked called Church Community Housing, and they're in a more rural area. They have housing, about 20 houses that they built that they rent to people who are low and low middle income. And they also have 20 acres of land that they're developing for farmland. They already have a community garden that they operate for the people who live in the housing, and they're expanding their operation with the help of Southside Community Land Trust to develop a communal farm on their property. One thing that I want to point out here is that these conservation and agricultural and community land trusts are all interested in holding and acquiring land. Typically, land trusts can purchase more than individual people, and so as such, they have the power to drive the market. For example, if conservation and agricultural land trusts buy up all the available farmland and open space in a particular area, there's none left available for other people, and it becomes more expensive. There's not a whole lot of data on these implications, but if you think about the fact that the Nature Conservancy has a hold over 103 million acres on this planet. It's practically the size of California, how much land the Nature Conservancy holds. And because they don't allow development of any kind on their land, whether it's agricultural or more higher use development, I contend that that conservation land trusts are actually making it harder for people to buy land, especially in close proximity to the places where it's being protected. So, future work would be looking at how competition among land trusts is raising the price of farmland for new buyers, and by my contention, enriching the slackers. What often happens is that states or land trusts will decide a particular area that's privately owned ought not to be developed and ought to be protected from development. They'll raise the money from outside sources or from within government through tax money, and then they'll pay the landowner to never use it again, essentially. Oftentimes that enriches those landowners to the point that they don't even have to use it for agriculture anymore. And so it becomes unproductive land. And depending on your perspective, if you're ecologically minded and you're interested in conservation, that might be great, but I care about people and I know that people have needs. And so I don't think that's great. Okay, I'm going to move forward. And we're going to talk about organizational leadership in general. And the reason that we're going to do this is because Southside Community Land Trust and not-for-profit organizations at large actually work on completely different conceptual models as to how organizations ought to be structured and work. So this is UTRGV's leadership organizational chart. We see the president, Guy Bailey, at the top, and all of the vice presidents and so forth, and then deans and associates and stuff below them. Of course, this organizational chart cascades down and down and down all the way to the point where it gets to people who are not making enough money for a living at entry-level full-time administrative positions. I'm going to contend that this standard hierarchical structure is paternalistic, and that it makes you feel like you need to climb your way to the top. In a model such as this, when you structure your organization this way, people are above and below each other. And if you think about the narrative of that system, this system is oppressive by nature and design. In my experience, in my examinations, not-for-profit organizations don't structure themselves this way. When I entered SCLT, they did not have an organizational chart to show me. And I don't think they even understood how their organization was I don't think they had a systemic pictorial diagram of in their minds. But over 3 years of working with them, I developed an understanding of how they work. And I'm going to talk about the model for organization there. This model of organization is the crux of why not-for-profit organizations can do so much money or so much work with so little money. So let's first look at an alternative model. People at Apple are creative, and they're like, we don't like that top-down hierarchical structure. This is the way our organization is arranged. Apple has what they call this Mother B circular model of organization. There is a more modern one with the current CEO in the middle, but it looks the same as this. I look at this and I say to myself, it doesn't seem very maternalistic. I don't think of a Mother B as caring for the people that are in her inner circle, her children. This seems to me a more self-centered and male-dominated system, with the CEO at the center, the most important thing, and surrounded by all men. Okay, so this is not the way. That Southside Community Land Trust or most other not-for-profits work. Although I will contend that they have a circular model. I was struggling with how to represent this, and just over the weekend, I kind of came up with this. I'm sorry I don't have it in a better format, so this is my hand sketch. But I want to explain that inside Southside Community Land Trust, organizationally speaking, things work more like this. The people in the center of the model, in the center of the organizational structure, are those who need the most attention. They're the youth staff of the organization, the members of the organization, gardeners who are served by the organization, farmers who are served by the organization, and farm apprentices who are learning how to become farmers through the organization. It's like a nest or a farmyard model where things can incubate and grow. Rather than moving up through some hierarchical structure where people have to climb a ladder, as people grow through this organization, they move outward. It's much more like an earth-based model. And I want to make the point that, there are other ways, there are other systems that we can think about like this. For example, when we talk about sending carbon dioxide, burning fossil fuels and emitting carbon dioxide, we can talk about sending it up into the atmosphere, or we can talk about sending it out into the atmosphere. Because after all, up or down depends on your position and perspective. So what I'm suggesting here is that rearranging the organizational model to put the people who need the most attention and are the least experienced at the center is not just a semantic exercise. It actually is a more realistic representation of how organizations that serve people work. I'd also like to make the point here that women in the not-for-profit workforce make up 73% of the workers. They only make up 45% of the executives, however, is better than in the corporate realm in terms of the people in the executive suite. But just as in every place else in the world, systems, even when they're designed implemented, I should say, by majority women people, if the people at the top are not are 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 not women, or a diverse and have a different lots of perspectives on how the world works, um, usually the system that results is unfair to the people who are not represented in that decision-making location in the upper echelon of an organization. Back to this diagram, I want you to notice that around these people who are in this barnyard are some of the younger full-time staff, a farm manager who manages a large communal farms, youth associates and youth managers who help to manage the youth staff. They're all under an education director. The directors are here in this outer loop outside of the managers and associates. The directors are director of education, an operations director, a farmland access director, a development director. It is true that there are lines directly in and out of these circles, right? The development associate does report to the development director, usually on most projects. And you know, like the administration coordinator is going to report directly to the executive director and so on and so forth. So there are these formal reporting relationships and check-in meetings between people who report amongst each other. But there's also the possibility of people moving around along these circles. So for example, the development director, she runs projects that are associated with big fundraising events. When the development director is running a fundraiser, she becomes the executive director of the organization, and this whole circle shifts and everyone gets underneath the development director for a time. So people move along these pathways. They're not locked in place, especially in smaller organizations, because people can move and work under different directorships depending on the specific roles that they're playing at any given time. Outside of the model, we have all the people who support this work and make sure that it happens. Up here, I have all the federal agencies that support the organization with dollars, which will include the US Department of Agriculture, the EPA, Housing and Urban Development, Health and Human Services. The organization has grants from all of these places. They need banks and lenders to help them finance projects. They need corporate America to help them finance workforce development programs. They partner with universities to do research projects, like the development of new industries. For example, there's a partnership right now between Southside Community Land Trust, the University of Rhode Island, and Revival Brewing Company. It's a $100,000 project designed to launch a hop industry for the brewing industry in Rhode Island. Right now, hops are imported from the West Coast. Within 5 years, Southside Community Land Trust and these partner organizations will have made it possible for all of the hops in Rhode Island beer to be grown in Rhode Island. So all of these partners that I've got around here, food system partners, are other organizations that do work within the food system. I'll describe what I mean by food system in a few minutes. But my point is that this model is different than a hierarchical structure in that it's reversed. The most important people in the organization are not the executive director and the board of directors, but the people who are being served here in the process. Inside the Southside Community Land Trust model, all right, let me go back to the previous slide and show that there's a bubble in the middle here, which is the youth staff, right? So let's talk a little bit more about how the youth staff operates within the organization. The organization works primarily in Providence, but it also works in a city called Pawtucket, which is just next door. The model that Southside has repeats itself on smaller scales internally. One of the organization's challenges is to find people in Providence who can serve in leadership roles in the organization. So there's one solution that we can just recruit from within and around other community organizations in the state and in New England, which works. But a second solution is to develop in-house talent, to bring kids from the community and grow them through different opportunities into people who can take on the leadership and the mantle of the organization. And here's what that looks like. In Providence, in the summertime, there is a cadre of 12 beginning youth staff, kids who are 15 to 16 years old. In Pawtucket, the neighboring city, there is also a cadre of 12 youth staff who work for 6 weeks in the summertime, 20 hours a week, learning farming and gardening and how to educate people and all kinds of things related to the mission of Southside Community Land Trust. Helping those youth staff to learn their job are 8 returning youth staff in each cohort. Here, these 8 returning youth staff are a little bit older. They're juniors and seniors in high school. And we've got 8 of them in each city, making sure that the beginning youth staff are developed the way they're supposed to be. Looking out for all of that process, we have 4 food systems interns. They're here in this outer circle, right? They're people who are college aged. They began their career at Southside as beginning youth staff. They were returning youth staff, and now they're food systems interns. An important thing about the food system, people who work in agriculture don't make a whole lot of money in the United States. We're aiming to change that as part of this process. So the beginning youth staff start at a salary of around $11. Returning youth staff make $12 an hour, and food systems interns typically start at $13 an hour. Those are essentially part-time summer job type positions. Full-time employees at Southside have a starting wage of $17 an hour, which works out to about $34,000 a year, plus they get health insurance. So it's a decent place for kids in a really tough economically disadvantaged neighborhood to find a place to work in their own neighborhoods and still make a decent living and afford their own apartments and eventually buy their own house. So by providing leadership roles early in careers, kids take important workplace skills with them from a very, very early age as a result. Okay, I'm going to switch subtopics here, and we're going to talk about what we mean by access, right? The whole conversation is that access is everything. So first, let's define what we mean by access. You have to know something exists in order to be able to access it. So knowledge of existence is first. You have to be close to it, right? You have to have proximity to a resource in order to access it. You have to have permission from authority in order to access a resource. That might be a government or authority or a landowner, or if you want to access a school building, you might need permission of the principal and so on and so forth. And then finally, once you access a resource, you have to know how to use it, right? If someone says to you, hey, I've got this 18-wheeler and you could truck all your carrots from here to the next state, so you have access to transportation. But if you don't know how to drive that truck, well, it's no good to you, right? So for access, you need the knowledge of existence, you need proximity, you need permission from authority, and you need the ability to use that thing that you're trying to access. What do the people of South who are served by Southside need to access? Well, here's essentially the list of things that they need. People who want to grow food need land. People who want to grow food need education about how to do that in the realm that they're in, physically speaking, how to do it better, but also how to do things like market their food and find customers and get food safety certifications and stuff like that. Farmers need credentials. You need to be certified, what they call GAP certified, right? It means that you have good agricultural practices on your farm. So you have to have, in order to sell to a grocery store, you need that certification. So Southside Community Land Trust and other organizations like them help people get access to those credentials. You need physical resources like organic amendments and tractors and all kinds of stuff like that. The organization does that too. People need access to transportation. When I left the organization, we were working on with the local public transit authority, the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority called RIPTA, on extending a bus route out to an agricultural zone 2 miles past a Walmart where the bus route runs now. If they could run that bus 2 miles further, they would be hitting 6 farms that have the potential of employing almost 100 people in the summertime. And people can't get to those jobs right now unless they have a car. So all of these things, and of course, people need capital, right? They need money to start up their projects, and we help them access capital through USDA and through banks and stuff. But I've highlighted here, I've made connections a stronger font, because all of this is irrelevant. If you don't know the people who control things in your region, you're not going to get anything done. So the connections are really important. That's what these pictures here are about. The picture in the upper left-hand corner is a picture of a garden opening with some of our board members and other people who work for the organization. The guy with the tie in the middle is Jorge Lorza, and he's the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island. We have the full support of the mayor, who sometimes calls up Southside Community Land Trust and says, hey, we have this 10,000 acre lot. It's totally a mess. Can we give it to you guys and have you turn it into a community garden? And they'll sign the title over to the organization, and then the organization makes it something that the community can use. Without the mayor's support and without access to the mayor, none of that stuff would happen. In the right-hand panel, this is a group of young people who came to volunteer with us at Southside through the National Civilian Conservation Corps. They came and helped me remove rocks and boulders and tree stumps from a 6-acre field on a communal farm that we run so that I could open up that field for 4 new farmers, which we did while I was there. In the meantime, our Congressman, Jim Langevin, who's right here, who knows about access problems, right? Because he's a paraplegic, so he knows how hard it is to get things that you need. He wanted to come and personally thank these folks for coming from all over the country to Rhode Island to help us out. So we have access to our mayor, we have access to our Congress people at Southside Community Land Trust. I say we because I feel like I'm still a part of that organization, even though they don't pay my paycheck anymore. But if you look down here in the lower left-hand corner, the woman in the middle is Margaret DeVos. She's the executive director of the organization. She's holding a big check that's written out for $600,000, which is how much beginning farmer rancher development funding came in that year from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the biggest funder of the organization. The guy standing next to her, his name is Ken Ayers, and he's the head of the Department of Agriculture in Rhode Island. The guy standing over here, his name is Jack Reed, and he's our senator he's our U.S. senator. And they all support this mission. Who are the folks on the outside? That's Margarita Pons. She's married to Teo Martinez, and they are farmers at Urban Edge Farm, which is where that greenhouse that you see right there is built. Finally, the picture down here in the lower right-hand corner. This woman is the current Commerce Secretary for the United States. Her name is Gina Raimondo. She was the governor of Rhode Island. Here she is talking to our farmer at Urban Edge Farm, the same place. So, so this is Chua and Kia Yang. They are, well, they came to the United States as refugees in the 1970s. They're Hmong people who were being politically, what's the word for it? Sorry, my vocabulary loses me. But anyway, they came as political refugees from Southeast Asia. And that's a common theme in the organization. A lot of the farmers that are served are refugees from Africa. They're from Southeast Asia. They're from Guatemala. And they all know farming and they want to do it in their new home. So without access to the mayor, to Congress people, to senators, to the governor, this organization and other organizations like it would not be able to do what they do. So any organization that wants to do all these things, have access to land, education, credentials, or whatever to anybody who wants them, you better make sure you have access to the people who make things happen in your community. Without these local leaders on board and pushing your mission forward, it's not going to be effective no matter what you try. Rhode Island is small, right? With 1 million people, only 1,240 square miles. It's not hard to know your neighbors there. So I would say, you know, this system works really well in Rhode Island because of this access to the power brokers. It may not work across larger states. So can you have this model all across Texas? Probably not. I think we need regional models, but could the lower Rio Grande Valley have a model for helping subdivide areas for small farmers who want to get into the business? Yeah, of course, it could be actually a little bit easier here because the land is cheaper and more available. Okay. We talked about land trusts and what they are. We talked about organizational structure. We talked about what access means. Now we're going to talk about the food system specifically, right? Okay, so here are some facts about the food system that I want to be able to lay out for you guys so you have an understanding of the realm in which these organizations work. First off, food systems consume 30% of the energy and produce 20% of carbon emissions on the planet. That's a problem. Production of food accounts for 68% of those carbon emissions, and transportation is only 5%. Here's the research that where that data comes from, if you're curious. It's kind of a crazy thing for us to imagine, because we talk about local food as being important in reducing carbon emissions for food, but the transportation of food is actually very efficient and it doesn't consume a lot of carbon. The production with big tractors and with a lot of petrochemicals, that's where the cost of carbon comes into food, and that's what needs to be fixed. Here's another fact. Small farms produce 70% of the food people eat on this planet. If small farms produce 70% of the food people eat on this planet, why are we growing thousands and thousands of acres at a time of corn to feed to cows and soybeans to feed to animals and more corn to be turned into ethanol? It doesn't make sense. It makes sense economically for the companies that are doing it. It doesn't make sense for the rest of us. In the United States, the average farm worker wage is 53% of the average for all workers. Half. Farm workers make half the money the rest of the people do. Furthermore, that's farm workers, right? Not people who own farms, but the people who collect a paycheck from farmers get half the money that the rest of regular old workers and every other industry, when you average them out together, make. The people who manage farms, well, 68% of those farmers are male and 95% of the farmers identify as white. I have not been working in a system like this. I've been working in a system where most of the farmers and gardeners are women and most of them are people of color. However, most of them are in this position where they're not making as much as the rest of society. So ergo, for me, I come up with some conclusions. Tractors need renewable energy sources. That's an important thing for people to come up with. We're not there yet. You know, John Deere has been working on natural gas fired tractors, and they provide them to farms that can produce their own biogas themselves. And that's a nice renewable energy solution, but it won't work for everybody. So we need tractors that have renewable energy sources of a whole variety of different types. B, eliminating petrochemicals is important to reduce the carbon footprint of farming. This should be C, D, and E. I apologize for the error. Producing food closer to the consumer helps a little bit with carbon emissions, but it helps more with community spirit, right? We'll talk about that just in a second at the bottom of the slide. Fourth, down here, my fourth conclusion, we do not need industrial agriculture in order to feed the world. And the fifth conclusion here, our current agricultural system is not fair to workers, women, or people of color. And so these are all things I'd like to be thinking about and problems that I'd like to be helping to solve. An important caveat to recognize down here, consumers are willing to pay more for food when they know they're farmer. So the thing is, like, okay, average farm workers don't make a whole lot of money, but what if those farm workers aggregate their power and develop their own farms, and they sell to their local community that's willing to pay a little bit more for their food? Then you can both create that local food system, which develops a good sense of community and people understand where healthy food comes from, but you can also boost the local economy by keeping dollars in the circular economy, by moving between the people who are growing it and the people who are eating it. So a local food system is not really about eliminating energy use in the food system. It's about creating community and circular economies, and that's where the power of local food is. Okay, so beyond the general food system, let's talk about how Southside Land Trust and other organizations potentially like it can go about solving the problems of the food system. Here's a big, wide open slide that talks about all the different programs that are available. This isn't everything that happens at Southside Community Land Trust, but it's all the things that are under programs which are designed to give services, give access to services, connections, training, land, equipment, all the things that those farmers and gardeners need. In the Farmland Access Program at Southside Community Land Trust, they have 22 community gardens that they own title to, and there are 36 partner gardens that they provide resources to. So this is a huge system, right? Within those 22 Southside Community Land Trust gardens, there are 570 families that grow food. So this is something where it's measurable on the scale of food production in the region and food consumption in the region. This organization also runs community farms. These are big ex-urban spaces of like mostly 20 to 50 acres. Galago Farm is an exception. That's a little 1 acre growing to 2 acres urban farm. The organization is committed to chemical-free gardening, so they have a 50-acre parcel called Urban Edge outside the city, which is subdivided right now among 20 farmers. I have to look at my numbers because I had to add them up before the talk because things change there fast. And they've also undergone a purchase of about a $600,000 property with buildings and open fields and forests, which is about 20 acres in space, in order to expand the community farming system because the farmers had outgrown the land available. There are partner community farms in Rhode Island. The state of Rhode Island has land at a state park called Snake Den. They've got about 30 acres of open fields there that they subdivide for farmers and lease them out. There are private landowners. One system is called a Somaquin. It's actually in Massachusetts, right across the river from Rhode Island. But half a dozen farmers grow their food on 20 acres there. It's 20 acres owned by a private landowner who's committed to a fossil fuel free and chemical free and fair food system for the future. So it's a big deal down there. And also the organization has what's called the Land Access Working Group. Let me work on finishing up the description of that on a subsequent slide. The one thing I want to point out here before I move to the next slide, and you'll see education on following slides, so that same green panel and the blue panel show up again. But in order to make a little bit of money and train farmers, the organization also runs production farms. They have a small 1 acre production farm in the city of Providence, which raises about $60,000 in produce every year and sells about $80,000 in plant starts at the beginning of the year to home gardeners. This here is a 2 acre parcel along the shoreline in a very expensive area of Rhode Island. But the organization was able to lease that field from the state for a very small price, and there's organic potatoes that are growing there. Actually, the field's in organic transition, but the organization there partnered with a farmer to grow thousands of pounds of potatoes that were then sold at a partner organization, which is a food co-op in Providence called Urban Greens. And not only did they buy potatoes from me when I was working at Southside, but they also bought 1,600 acres of kind of ugly looking organic citrus fruit from Triple J Organics down here in the valley. When they needed to get rid of some, I said, hey, I know where people would love to buy that at a discount. So this is not just a local model, right? This is something that nationally, small farmers and businesses need to work together on. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide, but you'll see all of these things again. So if you're confused by everything there, hopefully we'll alleviate the confusion. So focusing in just on farmland access, we talked about the community gardens. This is Somerset Community Garden. It was the first garden developed by the organization starting back in 1981. It's taken them 40 years to get to the place they're at now. Just keep that in mind. This is not a fast process. There are partner community gardens that are smaller or look something like this. And the community gardens have in some cases, some people can't bend over, so there's access to elevated beds. It's all about access, remember? Everything is developed in such a way to make it easy for the clientele to be able to utilize and have proximity to. This is Innocence, the woman up here with the sheep. She worked as our beginning youth staff and returning youth staff, and she's serving here as a food systems intern, working on one of our partner farms. And then Southside Community Land Trust also manages a statewide program called the Land Access Working Group. Southside sits at the at the head of the table, for better or worse, in the regular hierarchical structure of that group. But under that umbrella are many other land trusts in Rhode Island. There's the Department of Agriculture. There's an organization called Land for Good that is a regional farmland access not-for-profit. there are all sorts of sub-programs underneath that land access working group. There's a hand-holding process that matches people who are seeking for farms, of which there are hundreds of these folks on a list in Rhode Island, being matched with available land. There's farm transition planning. So the organization and partner organizations help farmers who are retiring transition to either another family member running the farm or to making a sale of the farm and a transition to new owners. We worked on the model of RFPs. When you're in academics, you ask for money to do stuff all the time. You respond to requests for proposals with a project idea. We wrote requests for proposals when we had private landowners who wanted to lease their land. We would hold open houses for the people who wanted to check out the land and wanted to potentially build farms. They would write us a proposal based on what they wanted to do, and then we would help the landowner choose the right proposal for them. And in that way, we created many farms through this RFP open house model. That's one thing that you won't see in literature people are doing, because as far as I know, it's only happening in Rhode Island. And finally, we also hosted what may have been the most exciting event and most effective event that we had that was new. At the beginning of 2020, before the pandemic, we had what we called a land access mixer. That photograph of me that you guys saw on the original, on the handout or the flyer that Leslie made, that picture is me getting ready for a big event where I'm ready to create matches between big landholders in Rhode Island, families that have millions of dollars worth of land, and people who just want a space to grow their food. And in that mixer, we had 100 people. We fed them, catered. We had local restaurants who buy the food from our farmers, come and cater the event. Crave made tacos, and another organization made a whole bunch of vegetarian food for us to eat. And so what we did was we held this social event for people to get together. That kind of access and social connection and making friends is incredibly important. And it's not just true when you're trying to create agricultural systems, it's true when you're trying to create any system at all. I am fundamentally a systems engineer. What I do is build systems. And so while I worked in lots of areas like water resources and agriculture, here, what we're doing is talking about how to develop systems. And if those systems involve people, you have to consider how those people interact. And it's not just all dollars and cents, and it's not just all looking at numbers. It's also thinking about feelings, and you have to consider that when you do the work. The education programs are focused on high school students who become employees of the organization. The Youth Workforce Development Program involves an urban farm, youth enterprise farm. It's a 1/4 acre space where the kids learn how to manage their own farm. They hold some years, they run a CSA for the neighborhood. Other years, they go to a farmer's market to sell their produce. And they also bring in groups. It's in the summertime, so they're not exactly school groups, but there's local community centers in the city, and kids from those community centers come to the farm and they learn from teenagers. So it's all about education at multiple levels. And think about that nest structure, right? The older kids teach the younger kids, and the college kids teach the older high school kids, and it's a model of youth development that puts the kids at the center. Here's Dave Kuma, one of our farmers. He was an apprentice and he became a farm owner himself. And now he actually has his own farm apprentice, and he comes and teaches kids in the city, but he actually is on that one property that I call it a Somaquin farm, where he grows vegetables on 5 acres. When we have kids there in the summertime, they go on field trips to farms. They're involved in workshops where partner organizations come in and teach them about different other aspects of the food system, and also about other aspects of gardening systems. Horticulture is a big moneymaker in Rhode Island, so they learn about that too. We place people internally and externally in other food systems organizations to play specific roles for times. And then there's also an outward pathway that allows people to come back in at a higher level of the organization. The Multicultural Scholars Program at the University of Rhode Island offers full scholarships to people who want to study sustainable agriculture. So kids in our program who are beginning youth staff and become returning youth staff. If they want to go off and study agriculture at the University of Rhode Island, they have a free pathway to get there. And then if they want to come back to the organization, we'll hire them at the coordinator level at that point, and they'll make $40,000 a year. Education is not just for kids, right? There are farmer training systems where we host on-farm workshops and teach things like drip irrigation and no-till farming and stuff like that. There's an apprenticeship program supported by the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program at the USDA and by a host of corporate and other organizations interested in seeing farms developed in Rhode Island. So we take 6 people, place them on farms. We totally pay their salaries, so they're employees of Southside Community Land Trust. But they get to work on these partner farms for up to 2 years if they want to, and then the farmers sometimes hire them as farm managers. There's an aggregation and market development program where we teach farmers how to work communally to aggregate their produce and sell it wholesale. That aggregation program has grown tremendously over the last few years. And then we just recently, I wrote a grant to the U.S. Department of Agriculture asking for money for a multilingual food safety training program. We have farmers who speak a multitude of languages in this community, and but the farmers still need credentials. So we figured out how to work with partners to create a training program that would provide 5 credentials to farmers, and they can take the training in any of 4 languages that work for them. And finally, there's community outreach, right? We work directly with the community, knocking on doors, bringing people into programs and kitchens and gardens and stuff, doing nutritional workshops, school garden programs, and health equity programs. I'm not going to get too much into what health equity means. That's a whole nother ball of wax, but it just means that people who live in certain zip codes don't live as long and don't share the same health benefits as people who live in other zip codes. It's mostly based on money. And health equity is about figuring out how to get people who live in zip codes with lower economic resources to have just as good physical and emotional health as people with more money. You want to advance. There we go. Okay, just a few more pictures to illustrate some of the stuff.
We have a couple more minutes, Sebastian, then we need to transition
we
to
have to stop at 150 or we
yeah, we goes till 1.
Oh no, so we got 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, but we usually do questions for 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Let me skip ahead to some data that might help you guys understand stuff. Okay, give me 3 minutes to finish this up, and then we'll take questions. The acceleration of the modern development of the system, of the modern food system, is clear. Impactful work requires funding and in-kind support. Here's the story of the alternate food system in one organization's financial record. This is data from SCLT for some recent years. This trajectory of increasing revenues, increasing assets, and increasing number of employees is typical of organizations that are working to develop community-oriented local food systems, in contrast to most agricultural systems that are actually stagnant or in decline. You can see some of the data here, the increase in the number of youth staff from 12 to 22, 24 to 44 over 3 years, and the increase in the number of supporting members, people who have enough money to give the organization money to do our good work, from 561 to 622 to 817 in 2020, and the funds that are raised through their membership donations. So this same story is true at other organizations that work in the modern food system. Farm Fresh Rhode Island is a support and distribution center for Rhode Island's local food movement. Their expenses are also increasing. Their assets are increasing. Assets in the local food system are increasing dramatically. A third example, the Rhode Island Community Food Bank Association. The food bank buys more and more local food every year, and their expenses, their total assets, are also increasing dramatically. As a side note, just these 3 private organizations have 189 combined employees. I would like to contrast that for you guys with the Rhode Island Farm Bureau, a conventional agricultural association that is actually in decline. It's losing assets. This organization has 4 employees. The previous 3 organizations have 189. The Rhode Island Department of Agriculture, which has a $3.2 million budget, about twice the size of Southside's budget, has only 17 employees. So most of the energy here in the system and going forward in the United States is in chemical-free, closer to home food systems. And it's illustrated in the finances of organizations that do work in agriculture. All right. I was gonna spend some time convincing you that this can happen in the Rio Grande Valley. There's some differences between the states. Rhode Island's a lot smaller. The Rio Grande Valley is a little bit bigger than Rhode Island. But what I would say is, if you're interested in this happening here, don't focus on Texas. Focus on the RGV. I'd be happy to talk to anybody a little bit more about how that model might get transferred here. But you see, obviously, the landscape's much different there, forested, unlike here. So there's differences, but I believe that it's possible. I'm going to skip over how we might do that here and just finish up with these take-home messages. First off, the model of organization with those we serve and educate at the center is both metaphorically and functionally more accurate in describing organizations working in service of community. Access to land, education, and resources all come down to how well you can convince the people who control the money to support the work. It helps to have partners. I say that 3 times here because that is one of the key things here. You need more than just a single organization to do work. Number 3 is the always be friendly principle, also known as schmooze or lose. It's much easier to convince folks if they see you as a friend. Those photos with the governor of Rhode Island and our state senator or federal senator and stuff like that, those people are friends of the organization. A carbon neutral and 3-way sustainable food system is coming to an area near you. So if you're interested, come and play along. Finally, community land trusts, the specific type of organization that SCLT is, are in a unique position to play the role of farmer developer for people of color. That means helping marginalized people become their own farm leaders because they have social justice as a core mission and they have roots in urban communities in the rural South. Okay, I'm sorry I had to rush through that at the end. I even left out a lot that I wanted to talk about, but there's so much going on there.
Okay, let's thank our speaker.
There you go.
And we have a couple minutes for questions. Amandeep had a really good one in his assignment, his reading assignment. Amandeep, do you still have that question? Do you remember what it was?
Hello, Dr. Interlandi.
Hey, Amandeep, how are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, really the question is like how to engage the community engagement, like how to increase the community engagement in these kind of program. Actually, in my undergrad, I have 3 months program like RAWE. We take calling it Rural Agriculture Work Experience Program. When we are working with like farmers or that village peoples, they are very excited about these things, like the new things in agriculture, like our urban agriculture, you can say, or the other things we can include in that. But after some days or after like some time passes away, the energy, that excitement is very low down, and they started to ignore us after weeks or 2 weeks. How to engage like people in that?
Write them checks.
Yeah.
So the first answer is make sure that they're getting paid. We pay, I mean, well, there's like 59 employees in the organization, but we write checks to 1,000 different people during the year to do little bits of work for us. Every time there's a need for the organization, there's a farmer who's interested in that need. And if you say to the farmer, hey, you can take the lead on this and we'll pay you $25 an hour to do it. We write checks to everybody, and that's the way we do it. Slip some people the money and they keep wanting to do it. If people can make a living at this stuff, then they want to continue. If they struggle financially, they don't. That's the one answer I have for you. Write them checks.
Okay.
Everybody likes to get paid.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Are there any more questions? So what's the first step in doing this here in the Valley?
So what I would do is I would find a few people who are interested in starting a land trust, identify a cheap piece of property that you can buy. The way to do that is not necessarily go to the open market and just try and buy something, but you write letters to 100 landowners and you say, this is what we want to do. We can only pay $2,500 an acre, but we want 40 acres. If you can do this for us, we're in business. and in the Rio Grande Valley, it's easy because the water is right there. Farmers need access to water and they need a tractor and some implements. So once you create that system to purchase a piece of land, then all you do is you start writing RFPs and you see who comes along. That's the way I would do it. I wouldn't go about building a big organization with lots of training programs and stuff like that. The first thing that people really need access to is just that space to grow food, which in the RGV is not as expensive as in New England, but it's pretty expensive still. So that would be my approach.
Is there a transformation needed on the market side? A lot of people here get all their food at Walmart that's imported from other areas. So what do you think about that?
So Walmart doesn't have to be a non-player in the system, right? The aggregation that can be done when farmers cooperatively work together to aggregate produce, they can meet the minimum lot requirements of places like Walmart, stuff like that. And Walmart will pay decent prices for organic produce. So if the system can be built on a piece of land that hasn't been sprayed with chemicals for over the last 3 years, it's a very easy process to certify the land organic, and then immediately the farmers can go through it through those sales channels. There are also quite a number of small family grocery stores that carry produce. If you go to Brownsville, there's a few there. Obviously, creating partners at all levels in the food system is required. Everybody's got to be on board and at the same table talking together. The development of a cooperative grocery store takes a decade, so that there's a lag that's here that doesn't exist up there. But people are talking about that here, right? Some of the students.
Hey, is anybody else here with me? Was it my internet that cut out or was it Sebastian's internet that cut out?
I think it was Dr. Innerlandi's because
Well, let's thank our speaker again for the record because it's being recorded. And so give him an emoji. Yeah. And thanks everybody for coming. Bye.
I